We're talking to Ajit Pai. He's the former FCC chairman. He was appointed by Barack Obama and served under Trump as well. I think he's the best chairman that the FCC has ever had, and he also is somebody who I think really, because of his passion, has saved the internet from net neutrality, and we've seen how good the internet has become.
You spoke earlier about when you were talking about hypocrisy, about the kind of controversy about big tech companies censoring conservative voices generally. And obviously we have a right for free speech. We don't necessarily have a right to an audience on someone's private website. As someone who's a conservative and is very scared of a federal intrusion on the internet, I am worried about this sort of new idea from the right where there's a big debate going on whether the government should step in and do something to these big tech companies. Where do you stand on that?
Well, where I stand is what I've said for many years, which is that these tech giants increasingly are running social platforms that have become the new public square. And to the extent that some are either obstructed or prevented from speaking in that square, I think it's important for people to understand how are these decisions being made, who is making these decisions, and why. And I think the past couple of months have only illustrated the fact that we don't have any insight here. And for me, at least as a consumer, I don't care whether it's a network operator like your internet service provider or a content company like a tech platform. I just want to know, am I able to speak or not? Am I able to read what I want or not? And if I want to understand the rules of the road. And I think that kind of lack of transparency is what's frustrating a lot of people. Nobody knows what's inside the black box.
So here's the deal. I've done broadcasts for 45 years. I know what the rules are. I know what the FCC says. I know what's acceptable and not, because the rules are very, very clear. Always have been. When we get blocked or we get dinged by some of these high-tech companies, we usually don't know why. And so I can't make sure that we're in compliance if I don't know what it means to be in compliance.
Exactly right. And that's why some of the decisions seem to be made as they go along. I pointed this out last summer when I asked on Twitter, why is the supreme leader of Iran allowed to tweet out threats, essentially urging the destruction of the, as he called it, the Zionist state and all of this nonsense, whereas other people are not allowed to say things which are clearly not as far as that, don't go as far as that. And I think it just goes back to, like I said, in November 2017, I gave a speech where I said, if you are really concerned about a free and open internet, what you need to be worried about is not net neutrality. It's the question of how these tech platforms operate free from any transparency requirements whatsoever. And I think people on the left and the right now, I would think, agree with that.
I am very concerned about the freedom of speech on broadcast radio and the freedom of speech for those of us, not just the average man, but also those of us who they're talking about deprogramming or licensing to be able to have a podcast.
It's an unfortunate time for those of us who cherish free speech and the First Amendment, and that's part of the reason why I've been so steadfast in my defense of it, because I do think a defining feature of our democracy is that any faction that happens to be in power should not have the ability to define who is allowed into the public square and who is not. And I think that's a basic tenet of American democracy over the decades. I might disagree with what you say, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it. I think that understanding has become frayed. And I think the First Amendment is even more important when we have a tribalistic political culture like we have now, because we don't want your ability to speak to depend on whether or not you are in favor with those in power. So I don't know what particular information Mr. Brennan was relying on when he made those assessments, but I'll just simply say as a general matter, the First Amendment is important for all of us, even when we disagree with the message that we might be hearing over the airwaves.
Are you concerned that the next FCC commissioner and chairman will erode some of these freedoms for radio? Are we in radio in a safe zone or not?
I certainly hope so. I mean, I did everything I could over the last 4 years, last 8, since I served at the FCC, to make sure that radio had the ability to thrive into the next century. It's the oldest communications medium of addressing the mass market that we've got. It's older than the FCC itself. And to me, at least, I think it is one of the important forums for discussion of these types of issues. So I hope that the next FCC will embrace that. I'm a little more worried about what people will think on the digital side of things, over the internet and the like, where, as I said, you have net neutrality advocates demanding certain types of regulations, but then on the other hand, demanding censorship on the internet, which seems inconsistent with that. But hopefully radio can continue to be one of the places where we do still embrace that First Amendment value that all of us cherish.
Do you know anything about the people that are coming in behind you?
Yes, I served with all 4 of the current commissioners who are there, including the acting chair. So I do think they have a shared commitment to public service, to the public interest. I think they believe in the First Amendment just as much as I do. So hopefully they will stick by that. That's been a bipartisan tradition at the FCC. And I think the most dangerous thing would be for us to get back into the game of approving licenses or doling out favors based on whether we agree with the political views of the would-be license holder. And that's just not what the FCC should be doing. It should be a market-based, objective decision, not trying to look into a crowd and pick out your friends.
I want to read a story to you and just ask you your opinion on this. And I warn you that I find what this man did and said to be disgusting and despicable. But there's a sentence that had just been handed down that I cannot believe is constitutional. A federal judge has ordered a Kentucky man who allegedly stormed the U.S. Capitol earlier this month not to make any comments about the breach or the U.S. government online. Damon Michael Beckley, who was arrested by the FBI in Cub Run last week, was released on conditional bond, which barred him from using the internet to post about the rally, the Capitol riot rally, or matters related to the U.S. government. He was also prohibited from attending any rallies, protests, or demonstrations, and he must be now monitored by GPS. He said things online like, Vice President Pence, my name is Damon Michael Beckley. I don't appreciate this one bit, the situation you caused here, sir. We're not putting up with this tyrannical rule. If we've got to come back here and start a revolution and take all these traitors out, which should be done, then we will. I don't agree with that. I think that's abhorrent speech. But isn't this, as a federal judge, telling him he can't speak about the government or voice his opinion about the government online? Isn't that a violation of the Constitution, and isn't there any protection for him?
Well, I certainly share your assessment of the comments themselves. This is an area of the law that's pretty well developed, and one that I'm unfortunately not as knowledgeable about whether or not judges can restrain the speech in this way. So I probably have to defer until I had a chance to read the brief, study up on that area of the law a little better. I know that this is something that has occurred in a number of cases, and I'd want to express more informed opinion after reading all that stuff.